Hey everyone, today we're starting lesson 2, which is on changing temperatures. And for most of the examples today, when we look at our learning goals here, it talks about using a number line to add positive and negative numbers. Since we're talking about temperatures, I would say that using a vertical number line like we did in yesterday's lesson is probably a pretty good strategy for that. It looks the most like what we think of as a thermometer, and it's easy to see when we're reaching above or below zero, that dividing mark on a thermometer between the positive and negative numbers. So let's take a look at some examples. First, we have a table to fill in, and what it's asking us to do is always start here at the same temperature. See, we're working in Celsius. Now, that's a temperature that we don't normally use here in the United States, but it works very well with positive and negative numbers because 0 degrees Celsius is the freezing point. So when we talk about temperatures above or below freezing, in Celsius, we're talking about above or below 0. So that'll work really good with what we're doing today. We're going to start at 40 degrees. They give us an example here where it gets 10 degrees warmer. So we increase the temperature 10 degrees, and that's why our final temperature here is 50 plus 50, positive 50 degrees, and our addition equation shows 40 plus 10 equals 50. 40 plus 10 equals 50. Now I'm going to draw that vertical number line here with our 0 degrees Celsius here at the center, and then of course above is positive and below is negative. So remember, we are always starting at positive 40 degrees in all of these 5 examples. We'll be at 40 degrees Celsius. Let's look at the next one. In the next one, we get 5 degrees colder. Now, we are doing addition equations here, so we are adding for today's lesson. So while you might be thinking subtraction, which is okay, we're also looking at how that can be done through addition. So if we're getting 5 degrees colder, that's going to drop our temperature 5 degrees, which makes our final temperature, positive 35. Now to do that with an addition equation, we would take 40. If we added 5, we would just increase the temperature. So we need to add negative 5 to get 35. Now, one strategy that I want you to be aware of is when we're adding a negative number, it can be a little confusing. If someone was just looking at this equation, they would see that it looks like we're adding and then subtracting 5, which doesn't make sense. The way to separate that is to put the negative 5 there in parentheses. The parentheses are just going to hold that number with its negative value, and then we can add these two quantities. All right, the next one, we're going to get 30 degrees colder. Again, we're dropping. We're going to drop 30 degrees, 10, 20, 30, and that's going to leave us at still positive 10 degrees. And we would write that addition equation as 40 plus negative 30 to do our addition equation, but still get a drop in temperature, and that equals 10. All right. Now let's look at the next one. We're starting at 40. We get 40 degrees colder. So if we drop 40 degrees, we're going to be right at our 0 mark, right at our freezing point. So our final temperature is going to be 0. It's not positive or negative, it's right there in the middle. And to write the addition equation, it's 40 plus negative 40, again in parentheses, equals 0. Now finally, for the last one, we're going to get 50 degrees colder. We start at 40 degrees. Now, if I make my marks here every 10, and I drop 50 degrees, that would drop 10, 20, 30, 40. I need to go another 10 to drop a total of 50 degrees. So now I'm below zero, I'm below freezing, and I'm going to be at negative 10 degrees. That's 40 plus negative 50 equals negative 10. All right, let's move on to the next part. Here we're starting at a different temperature. Here we're starting below zero. In some cases we're getting warmer, and in others we're getting colder. So probably again a good practice to draw our number line with 0 in the center, and we have our positive and negative here. So we're starting at negative 20 degrees. If we were to mark negative 20, and we can just divide this up by tens, so 10, 20, 30, 10, 20, 30. All right, if we get 30 degrees warmer from this starting point here at negative 20 degrees, 30 degrees warmer would move up 10, 20, 30. We're going to move past 0 and be above 0, above freezing, and we're going to be at 10 above, so 10 degrees is our final temperature. Our addition equation would show that we took negative 20 plus 30 to equal 10. All right, let's do that again. Now we're getting a little bit warmer. We're getting 5 degrees warmer. Now, honestly, since we're starting at the same point, we have a very similar change. I'm just going to use the work that I already did to get a final temperature of 10, and I see I'm getting 5 degrees warmer than I did in example A. Well, 5 degrees warmer than 10 is going to be 15. And to get 15 degrees, I would take my starting point plus the 35 to equal 15. Next, we're only going to get 15 degrees warmer. So we could go back to our starting point of negative 20, get 10 degrees warmer, and I'm at negative 10. Get 5 degrees warmer, I'm still below 0, and I'm at negative 5 as my final temperature. So negative 20 plus 15 equals negative 5. And then finally, I'm going to get 15 degrees colder in situation D. Getting colder is going to drop the temperature down below from negative 20. 15 degrees colder would take me past negative 30, another 5 degrees colder to negative 35. And remember yesterday we talked about these numbers as they get larger in the negative are actually getting even smaller. We're getting further below 0, further away from 0, so we are losing value there. So we would write negative 20 plus, now this is where we need to be careful, we're getting 15 degrees colder. I need another negative quantity to equal negative 35. Okay, now what I want to do before we move on is have you look back at this first table. A lot of this integer addition that we're doing today, adding positive and negative numbers, has a lot to do with patterns. So I want you to look at what we did in some of these situations. So in all of these where we got colder by different amounts, remember we started at 40 degrees, and when we added a negative amount, we obviously dropped to some extent. Sometimes we dropped below 0, and that was this last case here. And the rest we stayed above 0 because we didn't drop enough to get below 0. So notice that here, our negative number is greater than our positive number, and that brought us below 0, where in the other ones, they were either the same or slightly less. So that would be a pattern that we can notice and start talking more about. Here, we started in the negative, and think, what did it take for us to get back into a positive final temperature? If we were at negative 20 degrees, we had to add more than 20 degrees to move above 0. And that was examples like here, where we added 30 degrees or 35 degrees. If we didn't add at least 20 degrees, then we stayed negative, we stayed below 0. And then if we added another negative, we just went down further. All right, please be aware of those things as we keep looking at some other situations. For this next example, it says, one winter day, the temperature in Houston is 8 degrees. Find the temperatures in these other cities. Explain or show your reasoning. Now, what I want you to do is actually take a look at these. I'll do the first one for you. And this is, again, kind of the same idea that we just talked about. So we have a starting point here. Houston is 8 degrees Celsius. In Orlando, it's 10 degrees warmer than it is in Houston. So I could write out a number sentence, an addition equation for that. I would start with my Houston temperature of 8. It's getting 10 degrees warmer, so I want to use a positive quantity, a positive number 10 there to add to that. And that's going to equal 18. So Orlando would be 18 degrees. For the next one, we're getting 8 degrees colder than it is in Houston. So go back to what the temperature was in Houston. If we're getting colder, remember we want to use a negative quantity, but go ahead and write that addition equation and the temperature here in Salt Lake City. Do the same for Minneapolis and for Fairbanks as well. Okay, finally, over on the back of your sheet, we've got a little practice with integers, and we're using some symbols here today. So there's a key written at the top of your paper, and it tells you that if it's a filled-in circle, it's representing a positive 1. If it's an empty circle, it represents a negative 1. So what we're going to do is we're going to write the values of these images for the different questions. We'll do the first 4 together, and then you can do the others. So the first one here, remember, filled in circles here in the key are positive 1. So each of these filled in circles has a value of positive 1, and that would give us a total value of 2. Plus 1, plus 1. The open circles are negative 1, so here we have negative 1 for each of these 4. Whoop. Each of those 4, so we combine those to get negative 4. And hopefully you're kind of seeing the idea with these. These are the easier examples where we're just combining quantities. Here we have 6 plus 1s, or 6, and now we start looking at a combination of symbols. If we have 3 shaded in circles, that would have a total value of positive 3. If we have 3 empty circles, 3 open circles, that would be negative 3. And our purpose is to combine this to say their values. Now these are opposite amounts. They're both equal distances away from 0 in the opposite direction, which means when they're brought together, they're going to cancel one another out and create a value of 0. 3 positives and 3 negatives will cancel each other out to leave us a value of 0. Now go ahead and look at the rest of these examples, some that combine positives and negatives and some that are just specific to one type. Put their values down, please. Check with the answer key, and then take a look at your practice problems. Everybody have a great day.